It's no secret fans are raving about the Mandalorian Chapter 15, The Believer, mainly for this one particular scene between three characters, Mayfield, Din Djarin and the mustache-twisting commander, Valen Hess. Fans and critics alike have acclaimed this scene as perhaps the best in all of The Mandalorian, and even ranking it as one of the best Star Wars moments. In this video, I just want to talk about this scene and break it down, as I truly marvelled at how fantastic this scene was and everything it represented. So first of all, I think it's important to talk about the setup of this scene, because I think it's what makes it so great and powerful. Firstly, we see Mayfield discuss with the Mandalorian that the Empire of the New Republic is essentially a matter of perspective on who is the good and bad guy, whilst discussing the villagers outside their transport, that to them, we're all just rulers taking their land. This discussion truly enriches the Star Wars universe when it looks deeper into the mythos behind the good and bad. Whilst I love the original trilogy, it didn't do much to look past the good and bad guys, which is fine because those films work perfectly. But for future stories to be compelling, they need to look at these characters deeper and at not such a superficial level of being bad guys and good guys, and nothing in between. Franchises have been doing this more frequently, looking far deeper into their stories and the actions of their characters. Some have done it well, and some have done it badly. Whether a story does it in a good or bad way, it does always raise interesting questions, such as, was Superman kind of a villain in Man of Steel for destroying a city? Or would people actually be scared of the Avengers after two huge battles essentially levelling two cities? Whilst it would be easy to just end those films with celebrations, as they are our heroes in the stories, I think looking deeper at these characters in future stories always poses interesting questions. This is something The Mandalorian is willing to do, and something the sequel trilogy really should have done. Whilst The Last Jedi did flirt with that idea, it never went all in on its statement.
The Jedi are romanticized, deified. But if you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure, hypocrisy, hubris. See you around, kid.
And by the end of the film, switch back to the status quo, good and bad. I think it's an interesting story point to actually try and humanise the stormtroopers. This is one of the first instances I can think of in the live action Star Wars series where the stormtroopers actually acted like human beings and not mindless drones. Mayfield and Mando enter the base to an eruption of applause and celebration for their successful mission. This shows the actual human side of these men in the iconic trooper armour, showing that just like the Resistance, these are just men who have a differing ideal, and whilst they are bad guys, are they unsavable? I felt adding this moment, accompanied with the surge of heroic music when TIE fighters and ground troopers came to our hero's rescue, was an attempt from the director to get the audience to like the Empire and actually connect with them instead of the mindless troopers we have seen before. This is something Star Wars has never actually done, showing the human side of the troopers. Whilst Rogue One did this with the Resistance fighters, the Stormtroopers were still shown as mindless soldiers, with no consequence for loss of life. Despite the war they are fighting, there are major casualties on both sides. This is something the Plinkett Reviews has spoken about before, with the clone troopers being essentially faceless soldiers, where the audience is unable to connect with them, because, well, you've got a million of these guys on ice, so who cares if they die? Humanising stormtroopers before this tense scene adds so much to it, because now we have seen the Empire in a positive light, and they have become humanised and the audience can relate. If you took these two parts out, yes, the scene would still work, but keeping them in adds that extra layer. And now we are seeing this story from a different point of view, and can connect more with Mayfield as he discusses the loss of his fellow soldiers in the Operation Cypher battle. I think what makes this scene so compelling as well is simply how uncomfortable it is. And there are three reasons this scene is so uncomfortable and tense to sit through. Firstly, you are wondering if the commander has already made out our heroes, and knows they are not stormtroopers through recognising Mayfield. The whole scene was undoubtedly inspired hugely by the bar scene in Inglourious Basterds. A hugely tense and captivating scene where an SS officer joins the table of 5 German spies, and throughout you have no idea what will happen. Will the SS officer realise who these people are? Does he already know? And if he already knows, then what will happen to our heroes? Eventually, both scenes end the same way, with a shootout. The comparisons between the Inglourious Basterds scene and this Mandalorian scene have been well spoken about, But I actually think there's a scene from a different film that this scene is inspired by, and that is between William Dafoe and Christian Bale in American Psycho. This scene was filmed 3 different times, with William Dafoe's detective character questioning Bale in 3 different ways. 1. If he believes him to be innocent. 2. He believes he is guilty. 3. He isn't sure whether he is innocent or guilty. It makes for a disjointed scene where you can't keep track on who is actually on top of the conversation, and keeps you on the edge of your seat. At the start of the conversation between the 3 characters, Valen Hess seems to be highly suspectful of Mando and Mayfield, to the point you believe he is going to call them out on their bullshit and have them arrested. However, by the time their conversation moves to the table for drinks, Hass appears to be more congratulatory of our protagonists, and seems to suspect nothing of our characters' true motives. By the time the conversation comes to the end, it appears Hass has twigged something is not right, as Mayfield becomes more confrontational in the way he speaks to him. It appears Hess has twigged something is not right, as Mayfield becomes more confrontational in the way he speaks to him. And before we find out if Hess has made them out, he is killed. The whole thing keeps the viewer engaged, unsure of what will happen next. Instead of having Valen Hess just come out and say what he thinks or suspects of these 2 troopers, he keeps the audience guessing, maintaining their engagement. You are unsure of what the next actions will be of our characters, and that in itself is how you write an engaging scene. Something I love also massively about this scene is the body language of all 3 characters, but mainly I want to focus on Pedro Pascal as the Mandalorian. The whole scene is so tense mainly due to his inability to interfere, and that all comes from the moment he takes off his helmet for the first time. The season 1 finale episode doesn't count. Din Djarin takes off his helmet and has a conversation with Valen Hess. Mando has always been written as a very confident, strong and intelligent man who, to be honest, strikes fear in people who see him. This is actually a point which is reinforced earlier in the episode, when Mayfield is genuinely scared of Din Djarin when he emerges from Slave 1. It reminds the audience that the Mandalorian is a feared character. However, once his helmet is removed, Din Djarin becomes a shell of his former self. I would actually compare it similarly to when Darth Vader removes his helmet in episode 5, or is seen in the Bacta tank during Rogue One. For these characters, it is a moment of weakness, and whilst Vader doesn't show his weakness, Din Djarin clearly shows his. Mando, after removing his helmet, becomes essentially a new character, someone who is not confident in the face of adversity, and looks basically lost and out of ideas. He is in such shock someone has seen his face, he is unable to speak or even maintain eye contact. During conversations, it adds so much more to this scene, and puts probably the table's strongest character out of action. Whilst the Mandalorian has always maintained control over most situations, or is at least the catalyst, now he is a backseat player, unable to alter the possible deadly situation ahead of him. I think Din Djarin's shake of the head to Mayfield to not lose his cool really shows how he has lost all confidence, and isn't the feared one at this table. Barely able to move his head side to side, the uncomfortable look in his eye, instead of the confident man he usually is. Now he is a shell of his former self, unable to stop Mayfield, when before in his armour he would be able to tell Mayfield what to do. Suddenly now he has no control. After the subsequent shootout occurs, Mando is still rigid. When he stands, he looks essentially stuck to the floor. He looks down at his feet, uncomfortable. Still, for Mayfield to see his face is great acting by Pedro Pascal, and really adds layers to the character of Din Djarin. This table scene is really fantastic, and I can watch it so many times. The acting from all 3 men is simply fantastic. You feel the pain behind Mayfield's eyes as he explains the atrocities he witnessed and the men he lost. You understand that Valen Hess is a power-hungry commander who does not care about the loss of life, as long as the Empire grows and takes control of more systems. And Din Djarin battling inner turmoil of having shown his face and what that means for him and everything he has believed in up to this point. I think this analysis of this scene wouldn't be complete without talking a little bit about Bill Burr's performance as Mayfield. Now, I don't believe Bill Burr is much of an actor, and is more of a stand-up comedian. However, I did enjoy his performance in Breaking Bad, but it was a bit more comedic in tone. I have to say though, Bill Burr is fantastic in this scene. You can really feel the intensity in Burr's performance as he begins to discuss what happened during Operation Cinder, and the huge loss of life, questioning who it was actually good for. Certainly not the men who died, their families, and, well, even him. And at the point Hess references the rhodinium Mayfield has successfully delivered, he has actually only helped the Empire and their cause, allowing them to continue to grow stronger. As Mayfield gets deeper into his conversation around Operation Cinder, you are drawn into the emotion in Burr's eyes. he is simultaneously able to show how distraught he is at seeing the atrocities he saw and looks close to a full-on breakdown, and can also show pure anger, and you are unsure what Mayfield will do next. Will he just break down, or seek vengeance for his fallen comrades? Burr's performance truly is captivating, and despite being a huge Star Wars fan, I didn't actually know what Operation Cinder was. But the Mandalorian writers do well in making viewers able to just understand Operation Cinder purely through the context of this scene alone. Mayfield talking about stormtroopers who died and their widowed families adds so many more layers to the stormtroopers, and these faceless soldiers become more three-dimensional characters, when before they were just seen as cannon fodder our heroes could kill without regret. I simply love this scene for everything it achieved in exploring more into Star Wars mythos, looking into ideas never truly realised in The Last Jedi, and adding more depth to the lore of Star Wars overall. I think what truly makes this scene so fantastic and refreshing in Star Wars is these simple things. No puppets, no special effects, no masks, just 3 people acting and emoting. Nothing spectacular, no fancy camera work showing incredible scenery, just 3 characters sitting at a table, talking, drawing your attention in. There are simply not enough scenes like this in Star Wars where our characters just pause from the madness and truly discuss the morality of what is going on around them. And this episode does this, and even does it a few times. Thank you for watching.